On a workbench design here, I want my legs to look like this with a long 2x4 and then a full lap or a full joint overlapping the board behind it, and then a cross brace in the front of it. So that's the basic leg design. Make a diagram for the tabletop. Got my boards. I had the lumber store cut them down just so it would be a little bit easier to transport, and then tried to calculate roughly how much 2x4 I would need, and then went with kiln dried 2x4 with the height. I want to match it up to the height of my DeWalt table saw. I have a little place for an outfeed table. Try to get something that's KD. Get the green wood, it's cheaper, but you're gonna have some issues with the shape of the board, so I usually try to buy these KD. Trying to get to, with the same saw that I have, I think this is the 7491 RS. Trying to get to 36 and 9/16 overall height. And then this is called 5mm underlayment. What this is gonna do is just give me a little bit of protection for the work surface. $18 for a whole sheet. And the dimension that I'm working with here is 54 by 40. Now that you got these legs cut, to visualize how this is gonna come together. So the other thing is I want this opening to be big enough to where I can slide that miter saw in, be adding a shelf on the bottom, and I'm going flush to the edges. I'm not going to be leaving an overhang. You're still going to have a way to get under the tabletop to put vices or bench dogs. I just laid out these two 2x4s, and the legs are going to be oriented this way. So I just need to figure out the dimension for the two cross braces, and since the table is 40 wide, these are 1.5 inches, then it'll be 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches. So here's all the basic cuts for now. If you're building to these dimensions, 54 by 40, I got 6 pieces of 37 inches. These are going to be for underneath the tabletop, and then also for the supports framed out, so to speak. And I'm going to use pocket holes to join the middle pieces to the frame. I'm going to put 3 GRK deck elite screws. These are number 9. They come with a bit. Surge bolts if you want here. For lag screws, it's going to put a triangle of deck screws. I don't do a ton of major pounding on this, so I think that should be pretty sufficient. So I'm going to put one, and then I can use it to pivot. I'm going to set the far one. You can be within reason here, but keep these flush here. Just try to get it flush with the surface. You don't have to go in. If it's not sticking out, it should be good. You can always put a vise or something later, and then this will still pivot to allow us to set the far one 6 inches from the base. Making sure to keep in mind the space you need for your casters. Looks like I need about 6 1/4. Things somewhat square. Make sure if you do this, you check your reference line and just bring the square up to the line, and then pull the piece down. The snugger you can get them in. See, this one's not dropping in. I have to wedge it in. That's gonna add a lot of strength. So I got all 4 of these cut in. Just make sure you measure that, you know, and try to get it pretty precise. You can cut a little bit over and then shave it down slowly too. Here, this triangle pattern, and then here I did 5 screws. Again, triangle, because even numbers, less strength, you know, they can fold over. And then I tried to do this. I don't know if it'll make any difference, but this triangle faces point up. This one, the point up as well. So this is a good idea just to make sure to take this extra step. All 4 of your feet, mark them up to where you're gonna put them. Little leg supports in, and this thing is strong, man. You could do gymnastics. You could jump your horses over it. Little template, and then I use a little punch. You have to find the center of the leg, set this side on the floor, use a little punch, drill a pilot hole for these lag screws. Then you'll install the wheels after. The thing I love about these is when you fold them out of the way, the wood of your bench will be sitting on your floor versus working off of a wheel, which is wobbly and unstable. On the two legs temporarily to do sort of a dry fit. So we got 1, 2, 3 braces on the bottom side. This brace will fit one against each leg. Then we'll have one in the middle, and also cut these. And then again, this piece will fit inside of here. This is upside down. Got all my caster frames on. These are on the outside. I ended up putting them on the inside later. I'll show you. So the next step will be, now you could just screw all these in, just straight screws from the side. I'm going to be using pocket holes. Okay, so here's all the pocket screws. For those of you that are interested in making a replica of this table, I got two 22-inch pieces. I got two 34-inch pieces. And I have 7 37-inch KD lumber. You can give these dimensions to Home Depot and have them cut it. Circular saw if you don't have any major tools, and you don't really need a major tool for this job. Really the most important piece so far has been the drill as an essential. That could be it. I mean, you could even get a miter saw, a hand miter saw, and clean up any of the cuts or make all of these cuts. 2.5-inch coarse grain pocket screws, and pocket screws do need a little clamping pressure, and it'll help you to keep everything lined up when you're screwing in and connecting the legs here. For these boards, you have the option, you can lay them flat against the tabletop, or you can have them upright. Since I'm going to have another board right in this corner, I'm not going to lay it flat, but just so you know, that is an option for you and would make your tabletop have a firmer surface on the edge. You want to try to get this flush, so use clamps here to help you, and you can use a pocket square or a straight edge to try to get these a little bit flush. This is the bottom of the tabletop. Again, we're flipped upside down. Just make sure they're flat and in, and then I'll use a clamp just to keep that pressed in right where I want it, nice and flush on the bottom. I'll lift it up and just check to make sure it's nice and flush here too. 2 interior pieces put in. A little knee pad will help keep your knees from getting too beat up. Also, to lift up the edge, I just use 2 2x4s, slide them under there, and then I can check to make sure the top side is relatively flush. Now keep in mind, we're putting plywood for the tabletop, so it'll be a little bit compliant. Again, this is upside down right now. Flip this onto its side. This middle piece was a little bit tricky to get pretty close to flush, so I flipped it on its side and I used this clamp to hold it where I wanted it, and then put the pocket screw in like this, and I got it pretty good now. Perfectly flat. So for example, here I have a gap, but when you travel up, you see that the gap flattens out there, so that actually is acceptable. The bottom here, this is where the wheels are going to go. Now for the next step, earlier when I gave you the 2x4s, I said we need 4 of them, so it's either going to be 3 or 5 or more. The 4 pieces I have are for the interior dimension, so theoretically you could put 1, 2, 3, 4. You can even put more, you know, as many as you want to brace your shelf. We're going to be putting a shelf on the bottom, but an option is to span this distance again. So I will assemble it, and then I will see how much flex there is in the legs. It's probably a good idea if you're going to be doing any sort of heavy work. Sucker blew out on me. Just really like a branch coming through here, and as I was getting my pocket hole screws in, it sort of twisted And that's what knots are. They are pieces of branches. So I'm going to reinforce. I'm going to add one of these in each of these corners now. These GRK, these are a lag screw alternative. Again, this is optional. I've been sort of lifting and playing around with this, and it is very rigid. The other consideration here is to add a foot to the bottom of this. There's different ways you could do that. You could even put a whole board going across up here and then have a foot. That'll add a lot of strength, but I'm pretty happy with the strength so far, so I don't think I'm going to need any of that. Here I'm going to add some cross bracing and then center brace to the bottom post. I'm going to have my drill press on here and just want to make sure that there is no or minimize the flex that'll be caused. Again, this is going to be underneath. Here's the casters. This is going to be underneath the tabletop. Cut this to size. This is the extra board, the extra 2x4 I told you about. So I do already have pocket holes on one side, so it'll be really a breeze to get it in there. And then these cross supports will be pretty easy to get in too. If it does start to flex, you know, you can always flip it over and add some more support, or end up, if you're getting twisting, you can support these sides. You could even add a center foot here. Lag bolt alternatives, I mean, these things are beasts, man. Watch out. They're like a water buffalo on the charge. So one thing is, if you're gonna add some of these, try to visualize where your screw lines are so that you're not hitting them. And then I also drilled a pilot hole, a lot of pocket holes, and you notice a little bit of a loss in performance. That's when I just hit the bit with a little bit of this industrial strength silicone lubricant. One note about why pocket screws work pretty well with stuff like this is, if you're just landing screws into this grain, this is called end grained, it's at the end of the board, it's a different grain pattern. The screws generally won't have as much holding power, neither will glue. Generally, there are some exceptions and ways to do that. So what the pocket hole does is it allows you to drill and put your screw coming out from the end grain into the face grain or the edge grain of the board you're connecting to. So it should theoretically, and in my practical experience, be stronger than just drilling through. However, for many applications, just landing the threads of the screw or drilling into the edge grain is going to be fine. One other way that you could do it is you could just angle your screws, you know, or nails or whatever you're doing, and it'll, I mean, pocket hole just kind of makes it nice because it cuts this groove in. You don't have to have it. You just really need some screws, and you can go in at an angle, and it'll be a little bit maybe harder to square. Have 6 screws. This is the tabletop. These are the tabletop supports we're putting in. So you're gonna have 2 screws coming in here, 2 screws coming in here, and then you have 2 screws sitting in here. So I offset them a little bit. Most people would probably think to put them straight on, but keeping them offset outside of these 2 screws, these both fit in here pretty snug. They're sort of wedged. I got a couple areas where I'm just a hair. So I'm gonna hit these that I marked with a sander just real quick. That'll take a few seconds. I'm gonna install the caster wheels. And one way you could test to see if you got flex is, right now as the table's on its side, you can put some weight, you can play with it, and you can see how much flex you're getting. I am getting a little bit edge to edge. Bothers me later. I could add the support here, but so far I think it's going to be fine for me. Hit these with a sander real quick. Also just hit the edges, so not a big deal, but if they're just straight edges, they could chip out a little easier. So just rounded that. It took a few seconds. One thing to keep in mind is you'll need 2 wrenches to tighten these, and this is really narrow. You need a narrow wrench. So the lazy Susan shot here. Casters work fine. You just lift them up. Later on I changed these to sit on the inside. And the bench sits down. Now one thing about bench assembly, if you're not going to be using my height, there's some different schools of thought. Most guys want the bench height like at their pinky knuckle. Mine's a little higher because that DeWalt table saw is going to match up to the height of the tabletop. I'm hoping, if I did my measurements correctly. Putting your hands, fingers, and trying to get it equal. It is pretty good. The Home Depot cut was pretty square. There are two sides to this plywood. I'm just gonna attach 4 screws, get this down. And the other thing is you want to be screwing into support. So one way to do that, I should have thought of that earlier, was you can set the side, you can set your top side down, upside down, top side upside down, and then you can take a pencil and you can mark the board, and then when you flip it over you'll have all the lines. Screws, the GRK thin 2.5 inch, and if you haven't figured it out, I love these GRK screws. They make an excellent product. They're not made in China. I think they're mostly made in Taiwan. So I like using them. They really do make a superior screw in my opinion. They give you a drill bit. I mean, you can get away without pilot holes on these. And these are great because they just sit in so perfectly flush. And this, when I put this on with the first layer, it was just perfect for the outfeed. There was a little bit of a gap. Craft counter bit set. There's a link in the description to this. These are adjustable depth stops, and I'm going to be using the number 6. I'm going to be using the big box of GRK Deck Elite 9 number 9 by 3 inch one, and it's a perfect little doodad. So we'll go around, we'll do all the edges, then we'll look at what's going on in the middle. Really nice to have 2 drills. This Makita brushless is really great. It's $99 on Amazon. I'll put a link to this too. I really like having this as a second drill, and I am using drills for this job versus using my impact because you can sort of, at least I can, control the speed of the screw a little bit better than with the impact. So drill, and when I'm screwing in, I'm on the lower setting and I'm not maxing out the torque. Oh hey, just sweeping my new house here. This thing is strong. Ride it like a bull. You could surf on this thing. You could ride it down an avalanche. Would survive earthquakes, bombs, nuclear weapons. Those of you that don't want shelves and don't have an overlayment, you're essentially done here. Another option here is to place a board, like an apron almost, protecting this plywood edge because it is going to get eaten up, although this was pretty good quality. Casters on the outside, but for those of you that have the space and the clearance, you could consider putting them on the inside of the corners. For the base, for the shelf, just place them and get them flush with the surface, and then we'll use like 5 screws. This is the top 2 shelves for the bottom, and the last thing that's left is to cut a little notch on the 2 inside corners. So just get that measurement, and you can use jigsaw or anything else, but my measurement's turning out to be 1.5 inches deep by 3/4. So now it's time to screw. I'm going to use 3-inch screws. Now one option is you can add plywall on that side and then build a second shelf above this row. You could put drawers in here. There's all kinds of optional steps now. Marked where it's acceptable to put my nails or screws. I also put a little X. That way I know I got a line of screws there. Don't want to be pounding nails into or onto screws. So just put a mark because you put the table topper down, and then you won't be able to see where everything is underneath. But only thing was I switched casters inside to outside. I used thin trim head screws in the 4 corners, and then used these small nails, and I got this seated. You can see what this material is. It's like a 3-ply. Came out real nice, sturdy. This was 40 inches by 54. Took about a sheet and a half of plywood and 9 2x4s and 4 casters and about 50 2.5-inch pocket screws and about 60 3-inch screws. Also 2 36-inch pieces by 2x3 to support these bottom shelves. Lots of options, lots of things you can do with this. You don't even need the casters if it's going to be stationary. Finish, keep in mind it's not a dinner table. This is a pretty nice finish right here. And going to mount my drill press and a bandsaw, add a vise, and that's it. Thank you everybody for watching. Please do subscribe to the channel.